Hey friends, today I want to talk about how to take care of your chickens when you go out of town. We've been raising a flock of 5 to 10 backyard chickens for 13 years, and we love them. They're interesting, entertaining, and we love all of the fresh eggs that we get. They really are the most useful pets that we've ever had, and they're not that hard to take care of. But what do you do when you go out of town? Let's find out. Taking care of these chickens has been a rewarding joy. They all have their own unique personalities. They're not a lot of work, but they do need someone to watch over them. So what do you do when you go out of town for a vacation or to visit family or for a work trip? Well, we've managed to take several trips each year for up to a week at a time, and I want to share with you 7 tips that we've learned that will help you make sure your chickens are well cared for while you are out of town. So let's dig in. Tip number 1, leave plenty of food. Now some people like to feed their chickens every day, but I use a big 5-gallon feeding bucket, and it'll last for at least a week. It could last for a week or two. Depending on how much the chickens are eating, how many chickens that we have. So this particular setup that I have works pretty nicely. I store all of my bulk chicken feed in these trash cans outside. And so I'll just take a scoop from there and pour it into this funnel, and it goes down into the chicken feeder. And we'll keep that full, and that will last at least a week with the chickens. So they're good there. So if I go out of town, I know that I should have at least 1 week before the feed needs to be refilled. Tip number 2, you want to make sure your chickens have access to good water. A lot of people will use a 5-gallon water or a 3-gallon waterer like this, and that's good. That will last several days. So if you need to go out of town, that water system will last you for a little while. It depends on how many chickens you have, and that's just something you need to be familiar with before you go out of town. How much water does your flock of chickens drink in a week's worth of time? How often do you have to refill your water? Now the system that I use is a perpetual system. So I have a roof over my chicken run, and then I have a gutter system on the end that collects the water into a 55-gallon barrel. Now that 55-gallon barrel runs a hose to a gravity feed water tray, and that water will stay replenished pretty much indefinitely. As long as I get 1 good rain per month, that system will keep water flowing constantly. So that's an excellent thing. I highly recommend that you invest in a watering system like that. Now, maybe you don't want to go through the trouble of trying to get a roof and a water barrel and all of that. That's okay. This particular watering tray can be run straight from a garden hose. So that's an option as well. It does get clogged sometimes. Occasionally there'll be some kind of a problem with it. And of course, if it's cold outside, then it could freeze. So that's something that you have to consider as well. What's the temperature going to be while you're gone? I myself, I like to have a backup system. So a lot of times when I'm gone out of town, I will have this system, and I will also use a backup system. That way, if one of them fails, then you have another one as a backup. So that's definitely a good option. and I would recommend that you have a backup plan. Tip number 3, make sure your chicken pen is predator proof. Well, at least as predator proof as it can be. Accidents always are possible to happen, but make sure that it's secure. That's something that you want every day anyway. You want your chicken coop to be secure, because if you have chickens, then you're going to have predators that want to get at them or that want to get in and eat their food. So I recommend that you build your coop as secure as possible and pay attention day by day to any kind of problems that you might be having. We put the tin around the bottom of the chicken coop to keep predators from being able to reach into the chicken coop. You'll be surprised, some predators will actually reach into the coop and grab a chicken. And that's been something that's happened to us, and it's kind of terrible when it does. So we have the tin along the bottom. Secondly, this is chain link fence. A lot of people use what they call poultry netting. Well, it says it's poultry netting. It's supposed to be for poultry, right? But that chicken wire is just not strong enough. We used chicken wire in the beginning on some of our coops, and this stuff, a lot of predators will tear right through it or chew right through it, and over time it rusts and degrades very fast. So do not use poultry netting or chicken wire. It's not sturdy enough. You need to use hardware cloth on your chicken coop at minimum. Something that's strong and sturdy and that will keep out the predators. Now, a lot of times I put traps around my chicken coop, live catch traps, so that if something like a raccoon or a possum is trying to get in, it will catch them. And that's a good thing to do as long as you're in town. But I would encourage you, don't use traps when you're gone out of town, especially if you're going to be out of town for several days, because if it catches an animal in the trap, then that poor animal is just going to sit in there and it's going to die of thirst. And that's a terrible way to die, and that's not what we want. It's not humane. So don't use a trap if you go out of town unless you have someone who can check them every day and knows how to take care of the animal that's in the trap, and how to operate the trap. So be careful about that. I don't recommend that you use traps. I just deactivate my traps when I'm going to be out of town. Do you hear that owl? Can you hear the owl? There's an owl in the woods. Just another one of those predators that can get your chickens. That's why we keep ours secure in the coop. We do let them out from time to time to free range, but we always keep an eye on them when they're out walking around in the yard. Tip number 4, what are you going to do with the eggs? You know, our chickens, they give us quite a bit of eggs every week. We get probably 2 dozen eggs a week from our chickens, and we collect them. You know, you collect your eggs maybe every day. But if you're not here to collect them, what do? Well, don't worry about it. The eggs will actually be good for anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks if you don't even collect them. If you leave them in the chicken coop, they will not spoil. They have a bloom, a coating around the eggs that makes them impermeable to air, and so bacteria and that sort of thing cannot get inside the eggs as long as they haven't been washed. You think about it, when a chicken lays its eggs and it wants to hatch its eggs, it will actually collect eggs up for a week or two, and it will lay a number of eggs before it actually sits on them. And they don't go bad then. And scientific studies have shown that eggs are safe to be left in the coop for up to 5 weeks. So if you're going out of town for a vacation, you know, for a week or even 10 days, your eggs will be fine. But they may be a little bit dirty when you get back because, you know, the chicken's been in there walking around and they've got dirt on them. But it's okay. But your eggs will be good for up to 5 weeks. And if for some reason you just aren't okay with that and you just don't trust that, well, when you get back, you can just discard the eggs, or you can, put them in a compost or feed them to your dogs or whatever you want to do to discard them. But they really will be fine for up to 5 weeks. If you're only out of town for a week, they're definitely going to be okay. Tip number 5. What are you going to do about how clean your coop is? Well, different people have different standards about how to keep their coops clean. And depending on what your setup is, you may have to think about that. I recommend using the deep litter method on your chickens. And the way this works is you simply put down a very thick layer, 3 or 4 inches or more of mulch on the coop floor. This keeps the bedding clean. You don't have to clean it. I clean my chicken coop once or twice a year. And so what this does is simply, you just keep putting more mulch down every so often. I throw in here scraps from the garden for the chickens to peck at and eat. I put down mulch that I get free from my city recycle center. People bring their yard trash like limbs and leaves and such, and they grind it all up and they give it away for free. And I put it down a deep layer once or twice a year in this chicken coop. It does not smell. It is just fine. The chickens have always been healthy. We don't have any problems with it. No complaints whatsoever. That mulch actually turns into a wonderful fertilizer for the garden. You have to be careful to age the compost and make sure that it's safe to use in your garden before you put it down. And there's rules about that you can learn about. I made a video about it. You can check my library. But when you go out of town, if you're using the deep litter method, then you don't have any concerns about having to clean the chicken coop. It's going to be fine for a week. As a matter of fact, it's going to be fine for a whole year. These roosters that we had from our recent eggs that we hatched ourselves here this year, they're running around outside. They're not in the coop because they cause too much of a ruckus amongst the ladies in the hen house. So we let them run around outside here to fend for themselves. You heard the owl that's out in the woods there, and that's something that they have to deal with. So far we haven't lost any of these roosters to the owls, but that is definitely a possibility. So tip number 6, get some help. Talk to your neighbor that lives next door or to a friend and ask them to come and just to check on everything. Because even though our setup is pretty much self-sufficient as it is, there's always a possibility that something could go wrong. One of the chickens could get sick, a water system could get clogged, a raccoon could get into the coop and eat all the food. There's always a potential for something to go wrong. And so it's nice to have someone coming by to check on it. And it could just be a volunteer. It could come by every day or every other day just to check on things. Or, how many of you have a friend who's got a teenage daughter or son that would like to make a little extra money? You could pay them to come by and to check on your chickens. A lot of people have a dog or a cat anyway. It's nice to have them coming by feeding your dogs and your cats, which are actually harder to leave dogs and cats at home than it is chickens. So if they're coming by to check on your other pets, maybe to water your house plants, just have them come by and check on the chickens too. And of course, a lot of times when we're going out of town, because we have dogs and cats, we go ahead and hire a pet sitter, and we just ask them to check on the chickens as well, and all of the other stuff in the garden that we do. Now, If you're hiring someone to come house sit for you or pet sit for you, I do recommend that you meet with them beforehand. They may be very experienced at taking care of cats and dogs. Chickens are a little different. They're not hard. It's just not something that most people are used to doing. Some people may be a little bit frightened of chickens, not because they're really scary. It's just that it's not something that people are commonly used to tending. And so it's always good to have them come by, go over the procedures and talk about different kinds of situations that might come up, explain to them about the food and the water, and make sure that they don't have some kind of a phobia with taking care of chickens, because that could be, that's a problem. They can't take care of them if they are afraid of them. So most people, once they have a chance to see the chickens and find out about them, they usually fall in love with them. But just make sure that that is the case. If you're going to hire a pet sitter, or even if you're going to have a neighbor or a friend come over as a volunteer to help you out, just meet with them beforehand, show them the chickens, show them your setup, and make sure that they understand what's needed. Tip number 7, don't worry. Don't worry. Make your plan, get everything set up. Now the temptation is going to be, you're going to be out of town and you're going to be worrying. Is everything okay with my chickens? Is everything okay back at the house? What about my little dog, my little cat? What about the garden? Is everything okay? Listen, worrying about it isn't going to change anything. And you're supposed to be on vacation, or maybe you're visiting family, or you're doing your work. You need to be doing what you're doing on your trip. Your mind, your thoughts, you need to be present right there where you are, not mentally back at home worrying about what's happening there. So make your plan, put it into place, and then don't worry about it, because worrying about it is going to change a thing. Of course, you can call. If you've got somebody that's come by the house to check on things, you can call in and check with them every now and then. But I guarantee you, if something goes wrong, you're probably going to be the first one they call to let them know. So don't worry about it. Jesus said in Matthew 6:34, so don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will bring its own worries. Today's trouble is enough for today. Worrying doesn't do you any good. It's actually bad for your physical, mental, and spiritual health. Worrying about stuff is like running around and around in circles. It takes a lot of effort, it wears you out and tires you out, but it doesn't get you anywhere. Now, there's a difference between worrying and planning. Planning is thinking over a situation and carefully planning a good way to handle it. Planning is a good thing, and if we are wise, we will plan for life well. Worry can seem like planning, but it's not really. Worrying is going around and around and around over a situation without making any progress. It just wears you out. Planning turns into worrying when it ceases to be productive. So take care that you don't let the idea of planning turn into an excuse for you to be a worrywart. Thoughtfully consider your situation, think it over, make a good plan, and then set it aside until it's time to do something. And try not to worry about it. And when you're tempted to worry, say a prayer. Philippians 4:6 says, don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank Him for all that He has done. So let's try to do that. Let's don't worry. Let's make good plans, and then let's get out there and let's grow and be fruitful.